We get asked a lot at DeepSeas about our perspective on OT and how customers can really look at the challenge of extending their cybersecurity program into the OT space. And the biggest question we get asked is, do I need an OT SOC? Is the challenge unique enough to need a dedicated team of security operators looking at the OT problem that is distinct and unique and separate from the IT problem? Here's our opinion here at DeepSeas. If I was going to create a Venn diagram of kind of the challenges of OT and the challenges of IT, there's a big overlap in the middle. And in that overlap, we really look at detection and analytics. The really nice part is that detection and analysis of those detections and the triage of those detections is really similar enough that we have found that with some specialized training, any smart IT analyst can then reasonably detect and analyze OT alerts. And where it gets very interesting is the response side. The response in OT and the response in IT are fundamentally separate. And this is where we have to be very careful. Because obviously in the OT side, you have manufacturing floors, you may have a system that's right in the middle of a $100 million batch of medicine, or in the middle of CNCing a jet engine, and you cannot interrupt that process without facing a huge amount of business risk. So instead, this is where we start to talk about mitigation versus remediation. And in OT, we see a lot of companies that really have to force kind of the mitigation of the threat while awaiting for whatever batch process can finish, and then looking at a full remediation of that threat. The really interesting thing about OT as well is something that is very challenging in the IT world about anomaly detection, right? If you're familiar with the UEBA problem, that is a huge differentiator in the OT problem, because OT environments, if done correctly, are very deterministic in nature, and anomaly detection is a force multiplier in an OT world. So let's talk about what we look for in our customers when we start having this discussion. The first and most important thing, right, we're going to look at this from the people, process, and tech perspective, but the first and most important thing is that we have an escalation point, right? This is something that manufacturing sites are not really used to, right? So being able to identify somebody that's on site with access to the systems that we can pick up the phone and call, right? Because that response process has to involve the business itself. Who do we pick up the phone and call? And this is a big challenge and a big culture shift from a lot of manufacturing floors that we've seen. So identifying that person that's going to pick up the phone when a cybersecurity analyst calls and then support the response needed against that threat, whether it is mitigating or remediating the threat. That also kind of blends into the process, right? Whoever is escalating to, you have a process that needs to occur on the shop floor side. Right? They need to understand the batch processes that are happening and what the response actions need to look like at that time. There's also some process challenges on the SOC side, because the SOC analysts have to understand that interfacing with the OT world is fundamentally different. And so, things like playbooks and runbooks should be updated to account for that. Finally, on the tech side, if you haven't solved this problem yet, you're gonna want some of that OT-centric detection and response things that are out there, whether they're agent-based on endpoints or whether they're more passive, listening to the lower levels of the Purdue model that you have in your manufacturing floor. But critical visibility into those layers is absolutely essential to the success of the rest of this working.